Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not so sure 2 days of this is Geneva Convention compliant, but we'll keep going. Let's just put on the table as honestly as we can what lies ahead for the American people and the U.S. military if we continue to stay in Iraq. Now, I know you can't predict with certainty the numbers we're going to have, but can you agree with this statement, General Petraeus? It's highly likely that a year from now we're going to have at least 100,000 troops in Iraq.
That is probably the case, yes, sir.
Okay, how many people have we been losing a month on average since the surge began in terms of killed in action?
Killed in action is probably in the neighborhood of 60 to 90, probably on average 80 to 90 average.
So if
killed in action. That does
right.
not include the 19 soldiers, for example, tragically killed last month in the
But here's what lies ahead for the American military. If we stay in Iraq and continue to support the surge through July, we're going to lose somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 military members, most likely. Hundreds more.
Yes, sir.
We're spending $9 billion a month to stay in Iraq of U.S. dollars. My question for you, is it worth it to us?
Well, the national interests that we have in Iraq are substantial. In Iraq that is stable and secure, that is not an al-Qaeda sanctuary, is not in the grip of Iranian-supported Shia militia, that is not a bigger humanitarian disaster, that is connected to the global economy. All of these are very important
Would that be a yes?
Yes, sir, sorry.
So you're saying to the Congress that you know that at least 60 soldiers, airmen and Marines, are likely to be killed every month from now to July, that we're going to spend $9 billion a month of American taxpayer dollars, and when it's all said and done, we'll still have 100,000 people there. You believe it's worth it in terms of our national security interests to pay that price?
Sir, I wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't have made the recommendations that I have made if I did not believe that.
Don't you think most soldiers who are there understand what lies ahead for them too?
Sir, I believe that's the case, and I have discussed the re-enlistment rates there. And they know the sacrifice that may be required of them during the tour of their next enlistment. And
knowing what's coming their way, how is morale?
Sir, I, as a general characterization, let me just say that it's solid. Because, and you've heard this before, I believe that morale is an individual thing. And morale is the kind of day that you are having. And if you lost a buddy that day, if I as the commander, if we have sustained losses that day, it's not a good day and morale is not great. But that doesn't mean that you don't have enormous determination and commitment to this very, very important endeavor, one which they all recognize is hugely important to our country. And I think that one reason that they do re-enlist, it's not just these tax-free bonuses, trust me. Those are wonderful. We are very grateful to the Congress for funding those. But this is about continuing to commit yourself to something that is bigger than self.
General, I hear this statement more than any other statement from troops. The reason I'm here is I don't want my kids to have to come back. Do you hear that?
I do, sir. And I have a kid who, as you heard,
who's going to go probably.
Pin jump wings on and may well. Yes, sir.
There's no may well. He'll either be in Iraq or Afghanistan. You know that, don't you?
Sir, I do.
And the recommendations you're making make it more likely that your own son is going to go to war. You know that, don't you?
In Iraq.
Anywhere.
That's correct, sir.
Yeah, in Iraq.
That's right.
Ambassador Crocker, what's the difference between a dysfunctional government and a failed state?
In a democratic system, governments, or in a parliamentary democratic system such as Iraq has, there is a mechanism for the removal of governments that people get tired of. Parliament can simply vote no confidence. So it's, I think,
would you agree with me that Iraq is a dysfunctional government at this moment in time?
Certainly, it is a challenged government.
Yeah.
I would not.
You called it dysfunctional.
If dysfunctional means it doesn't.
You could say we're dysfunctional, and you wouldn't be wrong. The point I'm trying to make is to anybody who's watched this, this government is in a dysfunctional state. The point I'm trying to make, there's a difference between still trying and not trying. What's the worst case scenario for the United States in Iraq as you see it?
Well, the worst case scenario would be a failure, either a complete failure on their part, where dysfunctional government leads to failed state.
What are the consequences of a failed state to the United States?
Just to finish my thought, that's one avenue. The other is simply a decision on our own part that we no longer want to sustain our commitment. I think either way, you've got a failed state in Iraq. That, in my view, has the gravest conceivable consequences for our own interests. As I mentioned in my statement, and as Ahmadinejad has made clear, Iran would seek to fill the void.
Is a failed state still possible in Iraq?
Yes, sir, it is a possibility.
Do the actions we take here in Congress, in your opinion, affect that outcome one way or the other?
Yes, sir, they certainly could.
General, what's the worst case scenario militarily for the United States regarding Iraq?
Well, again, I think if it is the consequences of, again, of a failed state, of failing to achieve our objectives and really to support the Iraqis achieving their objectives. Again, it could include Al-Qaeda regaining lost ground and its freedom of maneuver. It would certainly be a very, very heightened ethno-sectarian level of violence. These alliances of convenience with outside forces that would certainly flow from that, a humanitarian disaster of enormous proportions for which we would share responsibility, and possibly some dislocation in the global economy depending on what happens, obviously, with the flow of oil.
Why do you think bin Laden's so worried about the outcome in Iraq?
Well, I think again, as I mentioned earlier, it has been regarded by Al-Qaeda senior leadership, AQSL, as the central front. They are trying to give us a bloody nose, and which would be an enormous shot of adrenaline in the arm of international jihadists. If they had a sanctuary that close where they could, again, export elsewhere, I don't know what would happen in terms of the fighters who are there, whether they would then turn to Afghanistan in a bigger way or go to source countries or again, that's a good question for the intelligence folks. But a lot of these scenarios are obviously pretty grim.
Thank you both for your service.